Howdy friends, welcome back to another episode of CivOps Gear, reviewing all the EDC gear for everyone from the discerning civilian all the way to the experienced operator. Today is a less lethal showdown. We're going to take a look at the advantages and disadvantages of both the JPX Pepper Gun as well as the Byrna Pepperball Gun. We're going to start right here at the work table, take a quick look at how each one operates and how they load, and then we're going to go outside and put some rounds downrange. Stick around. All right, my friends, here we are at the work mat, looking at the JPX Pepper Gun and the Byrna Pepperball Gun. A couple of things first, just to get through a couple of issues. One, there are different models of both of these, okay? There are slightly smaller, I think there's a larger version of the Byrna. It's basically the same form factor, but I think that there is a slightly larger, longer frame version, the XL. This is the EP, which is the same frame, if you can see here, as the SD, but the EP does not have active safeties right here, which the SD does have. So the EP, by eliminating the safeties on either side, actually cuts down on the width by a few millimeters and is a little bit more familiar to those of us who carry Glocks or any polymer frame semi-automatic pistol that doesn't have an active safety system. So you're much quicker to fire once you draw. There's no active safety system to worry about. Some people prefer the safeties or an active safety system. Some of us don't. So I have the EP, which is the slimmest. There are also other versions of the JPX. This is the original model, which is the JPX 2, which fires 2 rounds. There is a JPX 4, which fires a block of 4 rounds. And I believe there is a JPX 6, although it doesn't fire 6 rounds, it fires 4 rounds as well. I can't tell you all the differences, but you're free to go and look on Pixon, P-I-E-X-O-N, or JPX, and you can explore all the different models. There is actually also a JPX 2 Gen 2, which I believe I just saw online recently, but I've had this gun for a few years now. And when I got it, there was a 4-shot version available, but I liked this one because I found it most familiar in that it was the closest size to a Taser X26, which I carried at the time. And so I found it most familiar, and I thought the 2-shot was quick to reload, and I just like this model. So this is the one that I had. That being said, about both of these, let's do a quick size comparison. The Byrna is not a small gun, okay? It has sort of the form factor you'd expect to see in like a compact or even maybe a subcompact, but it is larger than that. I'm going to give you a comparison to a full-size safety check on camera. Gun is safe. I'm going to give you a size comparison to a full-size Glock frame. So either your Glock 17 9mm or in this case a Glock 22 40 caliber. And you can see as I lay one over the other that, let's put the rear together. The Byrna is, boy, just about the same size as a full-size Glock. It might even be a little bit taller. Okay? So if you were to stick the weapon light from the Glock onto the Byrna, and we were to compare rails, you can see that the Byrna is taller. So this is not what you'd call an easily concealable, less lethal device, okay? So there's a quick size comparison for the Byrna. Now, let's look at the JPX compared to a Taser X26, and you'll see that these are similarly sized devices. They've got the same 2-finger grips And assuming that the taser is loaded with a cartridge and the JPX is loaded with a cartridge, you can see the slight length advantage of the JPX is a little bit longer. You can see that let's line them up here, JPX comes in right about a similar height. So you can see the size comparison here. These are similarly sized devices, all right? That being said, let's go back and just look at these two. I also want to note, the last time I had to use pepper spray on someone was only about 4 or 5 weeks ago, at about 6 in the morning, and I was finishing up a graveyard shift and got a call for a transient that needed to be trespassed off of a private property. And she was pushing that boundary of a 5150. She was not what you'd call rational, but seemed harmless enough until I was trying to get some information and issue an actual trespass warning, and she up and tries to clock me in the face twice. Thankfully, she was not what you'd call a good striker. The first one just barely grazed my face. The second one I was able to dodge out of the way. And then she backed herself up to just about a perfect distance, and I pulled out what I was carrying, which was a Saber Red Crossfire can, an MK3 size, and I just blasted her. And let me tell you guys something. There's crazy when it's convenient. And then there's crazy after you've been hit with some OC spray. And that's when you can tell who's really having a mental episode and who ain't that fucking crazy. Because she started making some rational decisions real quick. So the point I'm getting at is, I'm a firm believer in the effectiveness of OC spray, assuming that you're using it in an environment and a situation where it can be tactically efficient and meet your objectives without putting you at further risk. Would I have used that if she had pulled out a gun? Of course not. But she was open-handed. She was just using physical strikes. And I needed to create distance, regain myself, and then move in to use some open-handed techniques, take her to the ground, get cuffs on, and make an arrest. So OC was an effective tool, and she was screaming, "I need water for my eyes, my eyes, my eyes." And I said, "Yeah, your eyes. You ain't that fucking crazy, are you?" So anyway, OC is hugely effective, okay? Now, let's look at how each one of these works. The JPX gun fires these cartridges, all right, which are quick to load, loaded. And it does have a built-in laser, which you can see right there is the laser. And there's no real aiming it or zeroing it or anything. It's just built in straight. So, and there is a rail mounted because Pixon does make their own weapon light, which you can mount onto the rail here, okay? And this is not bad, but it's not like putting a Streamlight or a Surefire on. This is, I think, maybe 500 lumens, might be 300, I can't remember for sure, but it does have a strobe feature, and it is a significant light. It actually has its own rail system underneath. But I don't often use this. For one, I don't have a holster that accommodates that. Well, that's not true. I do have one, but I don't like to use it because I don't find it to be a great holster. The holster I use doesn't accommodate this. So, and I don't feel I often need this. The laser, you know, it doesn't automatically go on. You have to switch it on with this switch underneath your trigger guard right here, okay? As opposed to your taser, where as soon as you activate the taser, your light and laser comes on automatically. This, you have to make the conscious decision to turn that on. But let's talk about what this does. This does not fire pepper balls, and it doesn't fire a stream of pepper spray. This uses these cartridges, which fire, for lack of a better term, basically big globs of sort of a nasty combination of oleoresin capsicum, OC, sort of a tear gas concoction, and a little bit of pava, I think. And here's how it fires it. It's really a fairly devastating weapon when you look at level of force. When you look at, what's the term I'm looking for? So as you can see here, this actually uses small primer charges in the back of what are essentially shells full of this nasty glob of goo. And this does not use batteries or CO2 or anything else. If you see here, each trigger pull, if you watch right back here, each trigger pull activates alternating firing pins. And you can see them out the rear. So what you've got going on is, with each trigger pull, you're going to activate a primer and basically fire these globs of OC out with almost the force of a small round. Certainly with the force of a very strong BB, but almost like a small .22 round. So this is a devastatingly effective weapon, even just physiologically, if not physically. It creates a nice loud sound, and it is extremely effective. But it fires so effectively and fast that it really, at the right range, you know, this will pretty much hit where you're aiming. The JPX is a really, really interesting entry into the less lethal market. It really does fire very, very effectively. And in fact, we were even taught that you can use one shot towards the abdomen or chest to create distance, and then aim up and put the second round in the face. And we've practiced that, and it's these are, you know, and then it doesn't take a lot of storage space on either your tactical vest or a belt to store 2 more of these cartridges. So you could effectively, very easily carry 6 rounds to fire out of this gun. So this here is only for batteries for the laser. So there's no CO2, there's no anything necessary to fire this other than the trigger activates the firing pins, and that's it. And it hits primers just like on a firearm. All right, let's look at the Byrna. The Byrna is also a very interesting and effective option. The Byrna is much more familiar for anybody used to a firearm. It has a standard magazine release, and it drops out a magazine. The magazine holds 5 rounds of a number of different types of ammo that you can choose for this, which is something I like very much about this option. Not only will you see in a few minutes when we get outside the inert practice rounds you can load in here, but it has a number of different options of 68 caliber pepper balls with different ingredients and recipes. Some are a little bit less flaming hot, some are a little bit more flaming hot, some are just devastating. And then it also has kinetic projectile options, which are essentially just sort of like a beanbag shotgun. These do not, come here you little bastard. These do not explode or burst into anything. They're just hard rounds that fire hard, and hit a subject. And they create sort of a, like a beanbag effect. To load the magazine is simply like loading a real magazine. You just simply pop one on top of the next. There is this little gate here, which keeps your rounds in place. Load 3, load 4, and load 5. Oh. Boom, done, loaded. You can buy extra magazines, and it's always pretty easy to store extra magazines. Those of us familiar with concealed carry know that you'd carry at least 1, if not 2 extra magazines with you. And so carrying an extra mag is as easy as can be. Once you load the magazine, there is a loaded chamber indicator up on top. This pops up and lets you know that there is a round in the chamber. And that loads automatically. So once you drop the magazine out, you'll see that there are only 4 rounds now in the magazine. 1 is in here, and a quick press of this will drop that extra round out. And now your shot indicator is down flat. So let us empty that magazine, and I'll show you the Byrna requires a CO2 cartridge, not your standard 12-gram CO2. This requires a slightly smaller 8-gram CO2 cartridge, a little bit shorter than the 12-gram that most of us are used to for like Crossman air guns and etc. That gets loaded right in here. This little screw on top that's flush to the frame. So the magazine has a small little Allen wrench built right into the back. And you just simply pop that in and you unscrew this door. At least enough that you can now get your hands on it. Now, what's great about this is that you can load the cartridge in and pop this sealing door back on and tighten it, and it will not penetrate that cartridge. The cartridge is going to remain sealed until the first time you pull the trigger. So the first time you pull the trigger, that will pop your CO2 cartridge. What I like about this is that it makes it able to store this unfired for a long period of time, because you don't have an open CO2 cartridge slowly leaking air out of there. So you'd load your magazine, your CO2 is safely secured in there, and you can store this. And it won't pop that air canister until the first time you pull the trigger. And then it'll pop your air, and then the second trigger pull will start launching projectiles. And again, another great option is the different types of ammo that are available for this. Now, I'm in California, where you're only allowed kinetic projectiles if you're a civilian. I got all of these devices through either my company or a department that I reserve with, and because of all those licenses and permits, I do have some Pava balls. And we have a supplier that is allowed to sell those to me. But if you're in California, these kinetic projectiles, without a law enforcement or a security permit or license of some kind, this might be what you're limited to. I don't love these kinetic projectiles as an effective deterrent because, for one, you're loaded to 5 rounds. And though these may hit hard, you've only got 5 rounds, and then all you've got is something to throw at a person. So, you know, with extra magazines, maybe 15 rounds if you've got 2 extra magazines. But then I'd have to ask at that point, what is the advantage to this over, a BB gun or a pellet gun? I'm really not sure at that point. That's why I highly prefer this to be able to be used with Pava balls or OC balls, any balls that will shatter and disperse a powder upon impact. And you'll see when we step outside and I start hitting some targets, you'll see the difference between how these hit and how the exploding powder balls hit. So That should cover how both of these operate. We're going to step outside with our kinetic balls, some inert practice rounds, as well as a light blue practice version of a cartridge for the JPX that does fire, but it fires inert globs and not the devastating fire blobs. And let's step outside. We're going to shoot some old iPads that are in good physical condition, but no longer work. They're old Gen 1s and things like that. So we're gonna see the effects on screens as targets and see how accurate both of these are and what sort of effects all the different types of rounds have on an iPad body. Stick with me. Let's go outside. All right, my friends, here we are outside in the backyard, and the first one we're going to shoot is the JPX Pepper Gun. This is what a training cartridge looks like. It's this sort of teal botanical oak leaf green that cannot be confused with the black one, which is the active Pava OC cartridge. So this one is just some inert powder globs, and it's going to show us exactly how this thing fires, but without doing any damage to anybody. So we simply line it up on the track, snap it into place, ready to go. Here we go. We're going to fire the JPX Pepper Gun and see how we do here. Let's see the impact that it has on an iPad. We are 20 feet from target right now. Pepper, pepper, pepper. And there's 2 shots out of the cartridge. Next cartridge up. So that was our JPX Pepper Gun. You can see right on the back there that both of those primers have been struck by the firing pin inside the JPX gun by the alternating firing pins. So these cartridges are now expended and dead. Let's move on to the Byrna and see how we do with that one. We're now here outside with the Byrna Pepperball Gun, and let's go ahead and load it first with some let's see, let's try the inert balls first and see, because those should be most similar to the JPX effect, because these should burst and give us some sort of an idea of what sort of spread the actual Pava balls will give us when fired from this gun. So we're going to use these inert rounds. Now, as opposed to the JPX, the Byrna is going to store 5 rounds in a magazine. So here we go, from 20 feet. And that hit with such force that it knocked the iPad clean off the ground, onto the ground. That had some devastating force to it. We're going to go on and reset that iPad, and we'll try the kinetic balls and see what kind of effect those have. All right, we have set that iPad back up, and it is definitely covered in what would IRL, in real life, be a devastating combination of OC and Pava, but it did not hit with enough force to actually break the iPad. It certainly felt and sounded like it. There's certainly a psychological effect to the sound of those rounds going off, but it did not actually produce enough force with those breaking, exploding balls to actually break the glass. So now we're going to try these kinetic rounds, and see what kind of effect these have when we shoot them, again, from the Byrna Pepperball Gun. Here we go, from 20 feet, same iPad. Let's see what happens. Oh, knocked the iPad down in the very first shot. That seemed like a lot of force. Let's go see what just one shot did to that iPad. All right, friends, as you can see here, that one kinetic ball definitely shattered the glass screen on this iPad. Definitely shattered the screen. So that hit with a great deal more force than the exploding inert practice rounds, which should hit with about the force of a real OC Pava ball. So those kinetic rounds definitely pack some more punch. Let's put this iPad back up and see what kind of damage we can do with a full magazine. There's 4 more rounds in there. Okay, we're going to try shooting the last 4 rounds out of the magazine and see what happens. Here we go. 20 feet, 4 more rounds at the already very, very damaged iPad. Hit with so much force, we knocked the iPad down again. There is a very long trigger pull on this Byrna, which is probably a very good thing as far as safety is concerned, since this is mostly for civilian carry and for self-defense. It's probably a good thing that there's not a very, very light, short trigger on here. But it is an awful lot of distance to pull this trigger. Once you get used to it, that's fine. For me, it feels like a long distance, but again, you know, this is a civilian, less lethal device. That's probably a very good safety feature. Let's put the iPad back up and see if we can't hit it with 3 more rounds. Those kinetic rounds seem to hit with an awful lot of force. 3 rounds left. Here we go. Knocked it down again. There's all 5 rounds. Let's see what we've done to the back of the iPad. All right, well, here's the effect that we've had, friends. We let this thing get knocked down, and then we just kept shooting it. Those kinetic rounds have so much force that look what one of them did to the frame. That is really an awful lot of force, actually. Those hit hard. So as you can see, they absolutely shattered and penetrated the glass. And then another one really, really impacted and dented the frame. And you can see the little impact points on the rear of the frame where the impact from the front actually came all the way through and dented out the aluminum. So those kinetic rounds actually hit a lot harder than I was giving them credit for. Let's get a final summary in here. All right, my friends, we've just fired both of them, the JPX and the Byrna, and you've seen the effects that both of them have. It's my assessment, just based on these test fires, that the JPX, with its integrated laser, its very quickly changing cartridges, and its primer-driven power, is probably more geared for law enforcement or some type of security to possibly replace a taser. Some people I know argue that the JPX is more effective than a taser. You saw the type of spread that it creates and the ferocity with which it fires. The Byrna, on the other hand, with its CO2 power that just keeps going and going shot after shot, its easily replaceable magazines, and the impressive psychological effect of the loud CO2 driven power. And it's quickly changing magazines, although they're not the fastest to load the magazines, but once you have the magazines loaded, it's as fast as, you know, recycling a semi-automatic pistol. So the effect that this has, I think probably is more driven for the civilian market and probably a better fit for the civilian market. I'm not sure law enforcement would want to carry another full-size pistol in addition to their actual firearm. But that said, the effects of at least the inert practice rounds was also a great spread of powder. And the kinetic rounds, I kept firing a little bit more the few I found on the ground after I turned off the camera. And the CO2 kept going another 10 rounds maybe before it started dwindling and running down. The devastating effects of those kinetic rounds are more ferocious than I anticipated. Have a look at this. This is the iPad covered in JPX blue dye. The spread is all over it, absolutely everywhere. And it was all over everywhere, being hit once on the screen and once with one of them exploding just next to it. So the spread from the JPX is great, but look at the effects on the screen from the Byrna kinetic rounds. Wow, shattered that glass. Now, the Byrna at full power, the first few rounds of CO2 with those kinetic rounds, look at what it did to this iPad. This iPad is absolutely shattered and destroyed in all ways. You can see the indentations on the back of the aluminum frame. Those kinetic rounds hit so hard that it actually permeated through the innards and created an effect on the rear of the aluminum. So that created huge power. You can also see that this also is covered in powder from the inert rounds. So both of these guns have a great spread for their intended effects. But I have to tell you, the Byrna really impressed me with those kinetic rounds. It creates a lot of force with those 68 caliber balls. And so picking a winner, it's not really about picking a winner. I think both of them have their time and place. I think if you're a civilian and you want to carry something in the car or even tucked away on your person in some sort of like an IWB holster that will keep you safe. If you are not in California, I'd suggest probably looking at that Byrna with some of those Pepperball or Pava rounds. If you are in California, you're going to be restricted to those kinetic rounds. I think it's New York State or California, but those were devastatingly effectual. I don't think you would have too many people wanting to continue a fight after taking 4 or 5 of those rounds to the chest, abdomen. God forbid you hit them in the face with that kind of a power. The JPX gun, if you're working on duty and you have a taser and you don't like that you're restricted to 1 or maybe 2 shots depending on the taser you have, and you want something a little bit more guaranteed to have an effect than the taser, you might want to look at that JPX gun, because it will fit in a similar size holster as the taser. I'm sure you can clip it onto your tack vest or your plate carrier. You can also definitely get it in the same spot on your duty belt where you get a taser. And you know, the cartridges that you're going to carry are not going to take up a lot more space than extra taser cartridges, and they're already loaded, ready to go, and that primer driven power is effectual. So there you go, guys. I hope this was helpful. If you're looking at the Byrna or the JPX gun, I'm going to include some links in the description of this video down below. If this was helpful, please make sure you give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel for more EDC gear reviews for everyone from the discerning civilian all the way to the experienced operator. Make sure you share this video with somebody else you know who might want a JPX or a Byrna, and I will see you guys on the very next CivOps gear review. Thank you for watching. See you next time.